Good morning and welcome to the first August Board of Selectmen meeting. This is a regular meeting. Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are copies of the meeting's agenda on the table as you enter the meeting room, as well as a set of the materials that will be discussed and or acted on today. Item 2 is an approval of minutes from our meeting that was held on July 26th.
Move the approval.
Okay, second. Okay, I just had one small correction. Under the updates, let's see, first paragraph, 1, 2, 3. Fourth line sentence, that was not the case with the ladder trucks. It should be singular, because the area, it's really the area ladder, there's just one in the town. And then on page 2, actually, it's the first paragraph. 1, 2, 3. Third line where it starts, Mr. Tessie also said that, let's see, my eyes are,
The word he
he
used.
met with, yeah.
The word he used.
Well, and then also it should say resident Cali. So he met with Old Greenwich resident. That was the only thing I know. So it's been moved and seconded as amended. All in favor? Quickly, I'll do the updates today. Yesterday marked the official launch of the new town website. We are now www.greenwichct.gov. I do want to thank the IT staff for their ongoing work with this, as well as all of the professional staff in the town who have now designated content stewards for their departmental information. And those content stewards are going to be an integral part of the success of this new website, because they're going to bear the responsibility for its content and its relevancy and so forth. So again, thank you to Tom Klein, our Chief Information Officer, and his staff for launching the new site. Also, look forward to get the feedback from folks as it is inaugurated. There was a meeting of the Economic Advisory Committee yesterday. Tammy Kettler is working to launch Experience Greenwich Week, as well as several other business-centric activities. These are things that she is engaged with local businesses and the town to bring focus and attention not only on the merchants, but on all that the town has to offer. There'll be more about this in the near term, but I do want to thank Tammy for her initiative. She is working very closely with Sabine Schoenberg. Sabine is also leading the Think Greenwich initiative, and there'll be more visibility with that in the next few weeks. We've had some really relevant activities take place over the last period. One of them was the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Youth Conservation Program. This is a program that provides opportunities to teens to work through our Department of Human Services and some of our non-government organizations to beautify our parks, either through brush clearing, planting. We were pleased to go out to Byron Park on July 31st to not only celebrate the 40th anniversary of the program, but to give the teens a thumbs up for their great work. And one of the points that I made is that when they're looking back on their summer of 2018, they'll be able to show their family and friends the trees they planted, because that was one of the big activities, and it's certainly something they could be very proud of. Last night kicked off over in the Chickahominy neighborhood, the St. Roch Annual Feast. It's a community tradition. And on Monday, we'll be swearing in 2 new recruits for the Greenwich Fire Department. The ceremony is at 11 a.m. in the fire department headquarters, and the recruits are Adam Corwin and Frank O'Connor. Okay, that concludes those updates. Under old business, we have a matter before us called Stewart versus Town of Greenwich. With us, we have our special counsel for land use, Mr. John Wetmore, as well as Eric Brower, who is the vice chair of our town's Conservation Commission. I believe we've heard this matter before, and it's come to a successful and amicable conclusion, but if you can just give us the fine points.
I'm happy to report we've reached a final agreement with the plaintiffs on this matter. As I've indicated to the board when we previously met on this, the town of Greenwich will now be the owners of the Byram Cemetery, as it's known, and the portion of that cemetery known as the African American Cemetery. The driveway that leads to the Stewart property, which has existed for about 80 years, will continue to be possessed and controlled by the Stewarts. You don't want me to go through the whole stipulation again, do you? All the points? Okay.
I do not either. I think we were very intimately aware of it from our
Sure.
last meeting.
No problem. In addition, I do want to report to the board that the latest development in light of a recent article, I just want to clarify now, the 6 individuals who filed appearances in this case have sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen, which I'm very happy to have received as well, which indicates their full sentiment that the stipulation should be entered as a judgment by the court. They do not oppose the settlement in any way, and they feel the town has fully represented their interests in this matter. So that's very good news.
So what was that whole article about?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
We'll have to ask the Greenwich Time.
I don't want to comment any further on that, other than to say those folks are fully on board with the stipulation that you're about to approve. Once you take that action, we will return to court and have the stipulation entered as a judgment. It will be a full order, and we can proceed. I want to publicly, once again, thank Eric Brower, Vice Chairman of the Conservation Commission, for all of his efforts on behalf of the town in this matter. I think he's done an outstanding job in assisting in all aspects of the resolution of this case, and without his expertise and knowledge, this would have been a much more difficult result to achieve. And so thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Is there anything, does the board want to hear from Mr. Brower?
I think you've done a good job of presenting this to us in the past. You've made some changes that we had requested or
Yes,
asked
sir.
about, and I, for one, am perfectly satisfied
Great.
and comfortable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to reaffirm our gratitude to you, Mr. Brower, and the team that you work with, the Conservation Commission, Nancy Dickinson, State Representative Michael Bacino, the Cemetery Committee of the Town of Greenwich, the Greenwich Preservation Trust, C.C. Saunders, Brian Jones, the staff of Historical Perspectives, the Historical Society, the Rye Historical Society, and Joe Comboy of Greenwich Preservation Trust, who are all acknowledged by the descendants. But I know that this was a long time in the making and was required a lot of tact, and I think you should be truly commended, in you're emblematic of really the quality volunteer that we have in this town. So thank you.
I agree 100%. I would only ask from a mechanical standpoint if Barbara could have the selectmen execute and get back to me the stipulation.
Is the copy sufficient, or do you have an original that needs to be signed?
I can leave you some. All right, I'll do that right now. Thank you.
So we'll entertain a motion to approve the stipulated agreement for Stewart versus Town of Greenwich.
Second.
Okay, without objection. under new business today, item number 5, we have the municipal master agreement with the Connecticut Department of Transportation and the Greenwich Department of Public Works. Joining us today to present this is our Deputy Commissioner, James Michael, but also in attendance is our Commissioner, Amy Siebert, and we have our risk manager as well. Megan D'Amato. Welcome, Megan. I'm sorry, I was caught in my train of thought when I.
Yes. So, thank you. As Peter at least knows, we've been working on this since 2012 to get to the point where we are today. In 2012, the Connecticut Department of Transportation introduced an initiative to streamline the agreement process that they enter into when municipalities obtain funding through the Department of Transportation. The purpose of this is for every project in the past that we've received funding for through the Department of Transportation, we had to enter into a individual agreement that talked about how much funding we were getting, the risk and liabilities and responsibilities of both the town and the state for the work that was being done for that project. It also outlined specifically the reimbursement percentages, the process that was going to be involved in obtaining those reimbursement percentages, and all the process behind that. The purpose, the state in introducing the municipal master agreement was to streamline that process so that there would be one agreement signed by the towns and the state that would accomplish the same goal for the next 10 years, and then that agreement would be potentially renewed in 10 years. Each individual project would have a 1 to 2 page kind of what they call their PAL, project authorization letter, which kind of describes the project, describes the percentages, but the legal language behind the agreement would fall back on these master agreements. When they sent these out, several of the municipalities that they sent them to initially had concerns with some of the language in them. Town of Greenwich especially, because they're looking for indemnification as part of this agreement. The town charter does not allow the town to indemnify anyone, so therefore we could not sign this agreement. Over the past 6 years, we've been going back and forth with the state and their State Department of Transportation, their attorney that works for them, variety of different staff members within the state to try and see about obtaining changes to this agreement. Getting to where we are today, in May of this year, the Board of Selectmen received a letter from the Commissioner of Transportation stating that the decision's been made because 165 of the 169 municipalities had signed it at this point, that no changes will be made, and that if the town of Greenwich does not enter into this agreement, that the ability to obtain grant funding would be eliminated. So therefore, no additional grant funding would be provided to the town for transportation projects, which is a fairly significant amount of money. This includes all of our bridges. It includes some traffic signal projects, some transportation projects, roadway projects. So that's the general history behind this. So what we've done in working with law and working with risk management is we are going to be obtaining an insurance policy to cover the indemnification piece. In addition, as part of the bid documents, when we send these projects out for construction, the contractors will have to enter into an agreement that they will be indemnifying the town and the state as part of the project as well during the construction piece. So the town is going to get an insurance policy for design projects and also for the small amount of work that the town does. For instance, when we have our town engineering or highway staff going out and looking at these projects during the construction, there is a small amount of risk that they're involved with. But for the bulk of it, the contractor will be on the hook during the construction process. So that's the way we're resolving the indemnification piece. It's going to be an ongoing annual insurance policy that we're going to have to do for the self-insurance portion, which gives us the ability to indemnify the state. And when when we did the original estimate on this, it was around $25,000 for that. That was back May timeframe. I know we've changed our self-insurance and so forth. We are in the process of getting a new quote for this policy, but that quote has yet to come back in. But we would anticipate it being around that same dollar number for this. So at this point, I'll kind of open it up to questions. We've been working very heavily with G. McLaughlin, who happens to be on vacation this week, in our law department. He's on board with the way we're moving forward with this. And what we're looking to do next is we will be going to the RTM to allow the first selectman to sign these agreements. There's actually 3 different agreements. They split them up, one for construction, one for what's called right-of-way, if we ever have to obtain right-of-way and easement or obtaining property. And then there's one for design. So there's actually 3 different agreements. All 3 of those agreements will be put before the RTM at the September meeting with the hopes of getting approval at that time to be able to sign these to kind of keep the money flowing from the state to the town, or restarting the money coming from the state to the town.
Jim, could you just give a quick rundown of those projects that are presently in queue, that have funding, that this has delayed, so that,
So this list here, kind of.
if you could just give a quick. 'Cause I
So
know that-
I'll do a real quick summary. We have a frontage road intersection project and roadway project. That's about $1 million of construction money. We have a CMAQ, which is the Arch Street signal plan, which is all the signals near the Arch Street exit 3. That's around a $3 million project. We have another CMAQ project, which is up at the Glenville Road and Riversville Road project. That's around a $2.5 million project. We have the next steps on what we decide to do with the Sound Beach Avenue Bridge. That's around a $5 million project. We have the Oneida Drive Bridge, which was subject to go out to bid this summer. We'll probably go out to bid this fall, assuming these get approved. That's around a $2.5 million project. There's a Sunshine Avenue Bridge, which will be going out to bid this winter. That's around $1.5 million. The Davis Avenue Bridge project over in near Bruce Park. That's around close to a $4 million project. And then a couple other intersection projects to be determined that may be around another $3.5 to $4 million. So.
Great, thank you. I think that gives a good perspective of the impact.
The
of not-
magnitude of this.
Yeah, and the magnitude, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm afraid I have a few hundred. Yeah, I'm sorry. Most of them are legally related, and you may or may not be able to answer them, so let me try, Jim, okay?
I will do my best.
First question, which just to make sure I understand, the projects that you just listed and the amounts of money you just estimated, those are the amounts of money you would expect to receive from the state if the state were to grant that money, is that right?
The exact amounts are not exactly those. Those are the total project costs. Some of those projects are 100% reimbursement, so 100% of the amount would be there. Some of them are between 50 and 80% reimbursement. So I'm looking at if I look at the bottom line here and just doing a rough number, around $23 million worth of total construction and design costs. Of that, about $18 million worth of reimbursement money.
And that is over what period of time, roughly?
Potentially once this log jam's let loose, it could be over the next 3 to 5 years.
So, now I don't know what the charter says, but you described the charter as saying that the town charter does not allow the town to indemnify anyone. If that's what it says, and I don't know the wording, as I said, how does this get around that? I mean, the fact that you have an insurance policy, put aside other questions I have about that, doesn't deal, if there is in fact a flat prohibition. I don't see how this deals with that.
So my understanding is that the insurance policy, okay, so what it does is the indemnification, the concern is that if there's a claim, the town would have to go through the claims committee, and they can't, we can't enter into an agreement without going to the claims committee with them agreeing to it. Because we're kind of signing a blank check at that point. So if we have insurance to cover that, rather than having the risk of going to the claims committee, we kind of eliminated that pass through the claims committee.
That I understand. You have eliminated, arguably, I'm going to come back to that, the potential liability. But if there's a flat prohibition in the charter that says you may not indemnify anyone, you're violating the charter. I mean, the fact that you have covered the financial part of it is good, but it doesn't deal with the question of whether or not the charter is being violated. Am I being clear?
I don't know I'm looking for anybody.
Well, that's why I said to poor Jim,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm asking a legal question.
My understanding is that I may have oversimplified it in the sense of saying it doesn't say we absolutely cannot. It says, it may say something to that regard that would allow us to do that, but.
I just like to be more comfortable in knowing what the charter says and that we're not running afoul of
Megan
it.
can help.
Oh,
I
okay.
apologize if I may. This is probably more of a question for Jean McLaughlin, but the insurance policy would cover the contractual liability, and so that it would let the town out of the indemnification. So it's almost as if they're not signing. It's giving the state what they need, but it's not having the town indemnify the state, so to speak. It's
fully
taking over
understand.
right.
I fully understand it. But if the charter says that we're not to indemnify, then I have a problem with any indemnity, even though I understand that you have, and I don't mean this pejoratively, you've sort of backdoored the thing. I got how you've tried to solve the problem. But if there is, and I don't know that there is, but if there's a flat prohibition in the charter, then we have to deal with that.
Another thing, as I'm sitting here thinking back to this, another thing that I was early on in going through this, I remember them telling me that the only way you can get, the charter will allow it is if you go to the RTM and get them to allow you to indemnify somebody. And that the law department has, many years before my time here, gone to the RTM and asked to have people indemnified, and the RTM's told them that we won't indemnify other people, and please don't come back and ask us to do that.
Right.
So that's part of the reason we need to get to the RTM and put it in front of them, and I think by going to them with this and presenting it to them, it will give us that opportunity to get that approval from the RTM, possibly. That's our hope, so
Jim,
Okay.
off the top of your head, do you know the section of the charter?
I don't.
Right, and I mean, I would just add into this that G. McLaughlin is a staunch defender of the town's charter and all its clauses, so we should probably, Sandy, if you have a lot of those detailed questions, really get you with him, because that's, I think, to be fair, one of the reasons why it has indeed taken this long.
Yeah.
Because he is very particular about that and has worked with Jim, and everything extensively to make sure that it is going to be according to Hoyle, in terms of something that can allow us to move forward.
Yeah, no, I thought,
So I think that's
I thought, Gene, or
probably,
someone would be here.
So do we, but,
Yeah.
It's top, it's August, so
Mhm.
we
No, I
try to get this
understand.
moving because we have to be there in September. But it is, that whole business of understanding this contractual liability coverage within the insurance coverage is like a whole nother world. I'm looking over at Megan, we had to get Gene to explain it, I know, to me anyway, a few times. And it's a way of getting through this. But I think it is really important. I think if we can keep a focus on the goal of, while we want to fight some other fight, but while we could get these projects out of the logjam and get moving forward with that insurance coverage and being able to move this, it would be wonderful. So we hope we can get some support for that.
I understand the desire, and I'm sorry to
We're
be
happy to get you with
raising a question, but if the
No,
charter
no,
says something, I'd like to be
Absolutely.
assured we're complying with it.
Absolutely.
May I ask some other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully a little more mainstream, if I can put it that way. Well, I'm sorry, this is probably illegal too. What are you indemnifying them for? For what? In other words, you're going to indemnify the state of Connecticut. For what? And for how long?
The understanding is it's for any potential action that would be attributable to the projects that the funding is coming from. So for instance, if they provided us funding for doing a bridge construction job, and there is a claim that comes to the town, or somebody, say there's an accident on a job site and there's a claim filed, because the state provided money for this, the parties that may be filing the claim may file a claim against the state of Connecticut. Because the state of Connecticut really is passing money through to us, they don't want to be held responsible for this project. It's really money that's being passed through. It's not their project. Most all of these projects that we're dealing with are on all town roadways, so they're on our own property.
I guess my question is this, Jim. 3 years from now, there's an accident on the bridge and someone claims it's the fault of faulty construction on the bridge. They bring a lawsuit. Someone, heaven forbid, someone is badly, badly hurt, someone dies, I don't know what happens. There's a claim. You've indemnified the state of Connecticut, as I understand what you're telling me. How much insurance are you getting? I mean, how do you know how much to insure yourself for?
Sure, go for it.
So what we plan to do is to get a policy for the self-insured retention, and then the town's program would sit on top of that. Depending on what type of claim it is, if it falls under general liability, the town currently has $35 million in insurance coverage. That can be increased in the future if we feel the need. So far, it has been sufficient.
All right, so all this insurance would be is for the retention part?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I did not understand that.
I don't know if this will really help, but just, I tried to find something. So this is the BET Law Committee minutes when they took this.
Yeah.
Relatively recently. In this section here, it sort of talks about what Gene is saying. So I think this was interesting here.
Well, I see, this is the question I was
Yeah.
getting at.
I think that's where you're. I don't know how to fix that, to
Yeah,
get
okay.
that. You have to kind of move your finger back and
Yeah, no, I see, it could be changed. Okay, all right, so he doesn't want to do that, okay.
It mentions home rule.
Yeah, well, as long as we have an ongoing insurance that covers the permit. Okay, I don't, I mean, I understand this,
No official hears that. You need
no
to
official
interpret
can
it.
enter an agreement that doesn't have an appropriation, which is another, doesn't have one, that can enter into an agreement that they don't have an appropriation for, which is another reason. Okay, so he's saying they can't do it without an appropriation.
But they can't appropriate
But
because the
it's-
way it's structured now, it prohibits us from
Yeah,
entering.
well, and
It's
I
a
see,
catch-22.
and someone asked the question I'm asking here about whether you should be pursuing the charter amendment. And I understand the problems with that.
Which would then have to require a referendum.
Yeah, I see the problem. I see the problem.
I just,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
law, and Wayne is on his way. He should be here in
Okay.
about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, we're just trying to get a little
Okay, yeah,
context.
okay.
Because,
The other question I have, or another question I have, is when you talk about the contractors indemnifying us, and again, this may be a Gene question, do you know, is there a proviso that they will have insurance? The answer is yes. I mean, because a contractor indemnifying us 3 years from now doesn't do us much good, often, since they come and they go, as you know better than I, so, but they will have insurance.
They will have
You're
insurance
saying-
during the construction of the project, correct?
Yeah, and that will cover us beyond that, okay. Okay. Since it's a 10-year deal, I'm just wondering, and the price of the insurance that we're buying is an annual insurance, and I assume, and it's going to go up every year if the insurance companies have its way, and they generally do. Is there any way, at some point, of backing out of this? I mean, let's suppose 5 years from now, and all this money has not been allocated, can we just say to the state, forget it? We're either not going to take any more money because it's costing us more than we're getting, or, I mean, I don't know, just 10 years is a long time to be bound to something.
So that was one of Gene's big sticking points in this whole process, is 10 years is a long time.
Yep.
The answer we got from both the state and looking at it through Gene is the town does not have to accept money.
So that's,
It's not a mandatory thing.
Mhm.
So if we disagree with the agreement, we can just stop utilizing the agreement.
okay.
And then the agreement, and we could, and what Gene also said is we can put the state on notice that we're going to cancel the agreement, and then it would become null and void at that time.
Okay.
perhaps what we can do is, we have some other business, and not to hold you good folks up, but Wayne is coming. Is there something that we can, if there are no other questions on this, that we could
No, I'm good.
advance?
Yeah.
And then, because
You can go into executive session to start the interviews if you'd like.
just because there was one person who had a time
Right,
limit,
it's a
and we
time.
should, I believe, was it 11 o'clock?
They have to leave by 11.
Okay. So Mr. Fox is en route, so what we'd like to do, if you would indulge us, is we are interviewing various candidates for boards and commissions. There's one that has a time limitation, so perhaps we'll speak with her, and then come out and resume discussion on this. So, Barbara, just to be clear, we would actually be advancing to item 7.
Right, so I'll need a motion to go into executive session.
But to be
Or to interview candidates for boards and commissions.
correct. So we will just be entertaining interview for boards and commissions, one in particular, and then we'll come out and we'll resume our remaining business. Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, so without objection, 10:43. This is a resumption of the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We just concluded one interview for a board and commission pending arrival of our town attorney, who was at another town business meeting. The discussion that was taking place concerns municipal master agreements with the Connecticut Department of Transportation and our Public Works, and there were several questions of a legal nature as to why we are undertaking this and what implications it has as it relates to the charter language that was referenced that said it was prefaced that no town official should indemnify or is able to indemnify, if I understood the statement.
Yeah, as it was described, the town charter allegedly does not permit the town to indemnify anyone. And I have raised the question, if that is true, if it's that absolute, how does getting an insurance policy satisfy that mandate?
Okay, fair question. The expert on indemnification is Gene McLaughlin, who's away on vacation, but I will attempt to answer it for you. I think I can. The whole concern with indemnification and the prohibition against it is that it becomes an obligation of the town, which is unspecified, unclear as to what amount that is, and there's no limitation on it. It's an unfunded requirement or obligation that it had not been before the appropriate boards to put a number on it.
Mm-hmm.
On occasion, we find it important, although difficult, to move around that restriction and substitute it in some way. On occasion, we have modified the language, which on occasion has been acceptable. No indemnification unless otherwise provided by law. That has on occasion been acceptable to some folks. In this case, with the state of Connecticut, they have made it very clear to us that it's their way or the highway. What we have also done on other occasions.
Bad pun.
But accurate. On occasion, we have dealt with the issue by providing insurance. So we know what the obligation is. We don't need to get funding. It's not an open-ended one. There is an obligation which we meet in this way. And we do not feel, having done on occasion in the past, that's a violation of the charter.
Yeah, see, I understand the philosophy. In other words, I understand the theory behind why the charter says what it does. But it doesn't apparently go on to say, unless there's insurance to cover our expenses. I mean, it sounds like it's, and you haven't told me otherwise, that it's a flat prohibition. And if it is a flat prohibition, I understand working around it. I'm just not comfortable because it sounds to me like the solution is to change the charter. I understand that poses problems, but to say that you can't indemnify unless there is insurance or other arrangements to protect the town, because that's what they're trying to do. But still, it's a flat prohibition, if I understand it correctly.
It's a flat prohibition, or the issue has to be dealt with. The indemnification would provide that we have an open-ended obligation, not limited by dollar amount, without approval of our boards, who would have to go out and try to quantify what this potential obligation is. What we are doing is we are quantifying it, and we are limiting our exposure, so we are dealing with the prohibition, in my opinion, that we find in the charter.
No, well, I respectfully just say you're dealing with the philosophy and the theory that's behind the prohibition. You're not dealing with the prohibition.
We're dealing with the issue that the charter addresses,
Yes,
and avoiding the liability that the charter foresees.
yes, but not the language of the charter.
All charter provisions are subject to interpretation. We are obligated to avoid what that wants to prevent. We are doing that by providing and acquiring insurance. There is no longer an open-ended obligation. There's no longer an unquantified obligation. There is no need to get approval for monies that we don't know what it would be, but it's dealing with that potential liability and limiting the exposure that the charter wanted us to prevent. I think you have to look at the purpose of the charter and then how you're going to deal with it. We're looking at the purpose and we're dealing with it.
I agree with that. I mean, I agree with the purpose as you described it, and I agree with the fact that you are addressing it. I'm still a little uncomfortable with the fact that we're not dealing with the language of the charter. So while I don't want to start a whole charter amendment thing, why wasn't the charter, if you know, why hasn't the charter been amended over some period of time to provide what we're now talking about?
I think, in my experience, the concept has been talked about many times, because the concept creates a problem which you sometimes must deal with, or you lose the right to proceed under the contract.
Mhm.
In the long run, I think it would be something that would be worth looking at. I don't think anyone has wanted to address it over the years.
Okay.
I would not object to looking into it.
No reason not to. I mean,
No reason not to. No, sir.
I mean, it would sound like it's a cleaner way to deal with it. I would think the RTM would be amenable to considering an approach which deals with the issue as you have described it.
I think if it was done narrowly enough
Yeah.
to avoid the problem that the charter attempts to address, then the RTM may be receptive to it. Certainly, folks that deal with contracts, our purchasing department here and with the Board of Education, would be very pleased if we attempted to deal with it, because it's an issue which comes up on a regular basis. If we didn't deal with it, we wouldn't have this contract.
No, I understand the imperative, and
And are we meeting our obligations by using some imagination and attempting to deal with this problem? Are we avoiding the downflow that the charter attempted to address? And I think we are.
I think you are too. I have no issue with that. I think you are, and I understand what you're trying to do. To the extent I'm raising an issue, this is kind of a Rube Goldberg way of trying to deal with a problem.
Well, I think you have to be cautious that you don't interpret our charter, which has certain purposes, too literally, or you will never accomplish anything. So we look at the purpose.
Fair comment. It's just, whenever you get a flat prohibition in a charter like in a constitution, you better think twice before you avoid
Agreed.
it.
And I think by what we did, we met it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wayne, this was referenced in the law committee minutes, I think it was in May, I was reading, and it talked about this being a home rule provision. And so changes or through the special act, it would have to go to a referendum if it were changed, is that right? If there were a charter,
Fair question, Peter. I'd want to go back and take a look at the charter before I gave you a specific
Okay.
answer.
so if I were to summarize, this particular request enables the town to go forward in a constructive way to address the issue in the short term,
Yes, sir.
but there is a potential permanent resolution if in fact the charter language were changed.
Could be. Yes, sir.
I would like to at least ask that you consider looking into that issue, both about the change and about the point that Peter raised, namely, would it involve a referendum? What's involved in doing this? Is it a home rule issue?
That's a fair question, and I will do that. As you know, and as Peter knows,
Mm.
there are certain limited circumstances where you must go to a referendum.
Mhm.
Before giving you an off-the-cuff opinion, I'd want to take a look at the
Yes,
language.
no. Fully understand.
John, do you have any questions? No. I mean, I would just say that I'm going to support the request because I know how important the monies are to the projects, and sitting on the Council of Governments for Greenwich, believe me, the other towns are salivating about having our money if we were to forfeit it, and I don't want to see us forfeit it. So, Jim, you do a good job of, at the TTAG, right? The group that meets to lobby for our fair share of funding, and
He did a very good job, Jim did, in negotiating this with the state of Connecticut with the help of Gene McLaughlin. It was not an easy task.
Yeah, I'm going to support it too, for the reasons that Peter just stated, as well as my conviction that we are dealing with the intent behind the charter provision, but I would be less than candid if I didn't say that I thought that the issue ought to be addressed, because this, at least in my way of thinking, is not, in a perfect world, the best way of dealing with it. It's the way of dealing with it that we have to in the current world.
I think that's fair.
yeah, I agree. Okay, any other questions? No. So if not, is there? Where am I here? You're looking for an approval of this, so just of the MMA and all of its accompanying
They're looking for approval, I guess, to recommend to the RTM that you be allowed to sign those agreements.
Okay. So that's a motion. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. And Claire, you'll be happy at some point Frontage Road will get done. And Leslie, CMAC. If I recall, you conditioned the CMAC funds. See, your condition was for naught because it was held up anyway. Charter. Yes. I think frontage has been, yeah, they've been appropriated. So it's all the resolutions in the budget, they say upon receipt of, but those are two that stand out because they deal with 95, right? They're both. Okay, moving right along, Doyle versus Town of Greenwich. This is a tax appeal settlement. Mr. McLaughlin, who typically handles these, is on vacation. We have with us our town attorney, Mr. Fox. If there are any questions pertinent to the item that our desire is to be discussed in executive session, we can do that now and then come out.
This is pretty straightforward. The trial was started. The number they were looking for was significantly higher or lower, I guess I should say. They came back with this offer to Gene the day after the start of the trial. It's a reasonable number.
Different versus assessor value.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
okay, no need, or do you want to?
I move, no, I don't need executive
Okay.
session.
So, Barbara, would you like to read it as you typically do? For those who are listening at home, this matter pertains to a particular property in which the assessor's full value is $13,500,000, and the settlement value being $13,200,000, so reduced 2%, and that results in a credit of $5,934 against future tax payments.
Okay, this is docket number FST CV 16-6029173S, parcel number 02-1454. There will be a tax credit of approximately $5,934 against future tax payments. If the plaintiffs were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of approximately $54,395 plus interest and costs.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, without objection. Then moving to appointments and nominations, we are going to perhaps have some, we are in the process of reviewing a number of candidates for pending vacancies or positions that are up for renomination. And so at this time, we're going to go back into executive session for the sole purpose of interviewing candidates for boards and commissions, and I believe there are going to be 3 interviews. Is there something else?
And there's also going to be discussion of pending litigation with Assistant Town Attorney Ahmad.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me look up here. Right.
So I need a motion.
So moved.
Without objection, 11:21. So that's regularly scheduled August 9th Board of Selectmen meeting. We were in executive session to be updated on pending litigation as well as interview candidates for boards and commissions. And at this time, under item 6, nominations and appointments, we are going to take up a couple nominations. Let's see, this should be, oh, here we go. I gotta put this down to. Okay, Patricia Rand Burns, presently serving on the Commission on Aging since 2012. I'd like to move we re-nominate Patricia for a term that would expire
June 2021.
June 30th, 2021.
So moved. I will second your motion.
Okay, without objection. for the page on this. Should be right here. Did he not put the housing authority because the RTM doesn't take them up, right?
Yeah, because it's
All
not
right.
here. It's
All
not
right, well,
here.
we know that it's a 5-year term, and his term expired June 30th. I believe their terms,
Here is the sheet. It's,
I don't have a sheet, but they don't, the RTM doesn't see them.
no.
So this is, okay, I can handle it from here. So we have Angelo Pucci, currently serving as a commissioner of the Greenwich Housing Authority. His term expired June 30th. It is a 5-year term. I would move his reappointment to a term that would expire June 30th, 2023. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. I believe that concludes the nominations and appointments we're going to act on today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Without objection. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay.